The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Lieutenant Park stepped onto the deck of Horizon Prime for the first time. She was small by any standard, 5 feet 4 inches, slim build, black hair tied back in a tight bun. She carried a single bag over her shoulder and wore the simple gray uniform of the Earth Defense Force. Around her, the orbital station buzzed with activity. Species from across the galaxy walked past. Some were tall and covered in scales. Others floated on tentacles or clicked along on dozens of legs. None of them paid attention to the human woman standing alone near the docking bay. Had expected this. Humans were new to the galactic community. 200 years was nothing compared to species that had traveled between stars for thousands of years. To most aliens, humans were barely worth noticing. Just another young species that had stumbled into space before they were ready. She checked her orders on a small tablet. Combat Academy, Blade Training Division, Instructor Axe. She had heard stories about the 8 feet tall, 4 arms, natural armor covering their bodies like plates of bone. They were born warriors who had conquered half a dozen star systems before joining the Galactic Alliance. Their combat academies were considered the finest in known space. And now was the first human ever accepted into their program. She walked through the station's corridors, following the navigation signs. Other beings moved out of her way without really seeing her. She was used to that too. On Earth, she had grown up in the slums of where being invisible was often the only way to survive. The academy entrance was marked by 2 massive doors carved with symbols of battle and honor. 2 guards stood on either side, their 4 arms holding ceremonial spears. They looked down with expressions that might have been confusion or disgust. It was hard to tell with their insect-like faces. "I am Lieutenant Park," she said clearly. "I am expected." One guard checked, his mandibles clicked in what sounded like annoyance. "Human, yes, you are expected." He said the word like it tasted bad. "Instructor Axe is waiting. 3rd Training Hall, do not get lost." Nodded and walked through the doors. The academy was everything she had imagined and more. High ceilings designed for tall species. Weapons of every kind mounted on walls. Training rooms where students sparred with blades and fists and things she couldn't name. Everywhere she looked, she saw in combat. They moved like dancers, all 4 arms working together in deadly patterns. She found the 3rd Training Hall easily. Inside, about 30 cadets stood in neat rows. At the front of the room, a massive figure paced back and forth. He was larger than the others, his armor plates from old battles, his 4 eyes burning with intensity. "Instructor Axe." He stopped packing when entered. The entire room went quiet. "So," Axe said, his voice deep and rough, "this is what command sends me, a human." He walked toward her slowly, each step making the floor vibrate. "Do you know who I am, little creature?" "Instructor Axe," replied calmly. "Veteran of the Al Wars, holder of the Silver Blade of Valor, 32 years teaching at this academy." "You can read." Axe leaned down until his face was close to hers. "Can you fight?" "Yes." The word hung in the air, simple, direct. The cadets shifted uncomfortably. No one spoke to Axe like that. The instructor straightened up and laughed. It was not a kind sound. "We will see. Today we begin with a demonstration." He turned to face his students. "And come forward." A young stepped out of the formation. He was tall even for his species, his armor plates polished and clean. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. "And is my finest student," Axe announced. "He will show our human guest how train." He looked with all 4 eyes. "Unless you are afraid." Set her bag on the floor. "I am not afraid." The cadets formed a circle around them. Someone handed a training blade. It was heavier than she expected, designed for strength. She adjusted her grip and waited. And took his position across from her. He held 2 blades, one in each upper hand. His lower arms were raised in a guard position. He looked at her like she was an insect he was about to step on. "Begin," Axe commanded, and attacked immediately. He was fast, much faster than had expected. His blades cut through the air in complex patterns, using all four arms to create a wall of steel. Didn't try to match his strength or speed. She simply moved. She stepped to the side, ducked under a swing, rolled past a thrust. She let him chase her around the circle, let him put all his power into attacks that hit nothing but air. The cadets began to murmur. This wasn't what they expected, and grew frustrated. His attacks became wilder, more aggressive. He overextended on a powerful slash, putting too much weight forward. Moved. She slipped inside his guard, her blade sweeping up to deflect his upper arms while her body twisted past his lower ones. For a single heartbeat, she was pressed against his chest, close enough to feel his confusion. Then her blade was at his throat. The room went completely silent. 47 seconds, that was how long the match had lasted. And stood frozen, his four arms still raised in attack positions that meant nothing now. The training blade pressed against the soft spot beneath his jaw, the one place his armor did not protect. "Yield," said quietly. And's mandibles clicked rapidly. For a moment she thought he might try to continue fighting, then his arms lowered. "I yield." Stepped back and bowed slightly, showing respect for her opponent. Then she turned to face Axe. The instructor's four eyes had narrowed to thin slits. His massive hands were clenched into fists at his sides. She could see him trying to understand what had just happened, trying to find some explanation that made sense. "Lucky," he finally said. "A trick, nothing more." Said nothing. She simply picked up her bag and waited for her next instructions. Axe stared at her for a long moment, then he turned to face the class. "Training continues, pair up, basic forms." As the cadets began to move, Axe walked past. He paused just long enough to speak quietly, his voice meant only for her. "I do not know what you are, human, but I will find out." Watched him walk away. She had expected this too. The test was just beginning. What Axe did not understand, what none of them understood, was that had been fighting her entire life. In the slums in the military academies of Earth, on burning colony worlds and frozen moons and the broken hull of a crashed ship where she had survived alone for 11 months. They were warriors by choice. Their world had been gentle, their evolution peaceful. They had become fighters because they wanted to. Humans were different. Humans were survivors. The weeks that followed were the hardest of life, and she had lived a very hard life. Axe refused to accept what had happened during the first demonstration. In his mind, there had to be some trick, some cheat, some explanation that did not involve a tiny human woman defeating his best student in less than a minute. He dedicated himself to finding that explanation. He started with the training weights. Every cadet at the academy wore weighted bands during exercises. The standard weight for it was 50 kilograms, heavy enough to build strength without causing injury. On her first full day, Axe assigned 200 kilograms. The other cadets watched her struggle to stand. Some of them laughed. Axe stood with his four arms crossed, waiting for her to admit defeat. Did not admit defeat. She fell down 7 times that first day. Each time she got back up. Her muscles screamed. Her joints burned, but she kept moving. By the end of the week, she was completing the exercises. Slowly, painfully, but completing them. Axe increased the weight to 300 kilograms. She adapted again. When the weights failed to break her, Axe moved to sleep deprivation. He assigned the night watch rotation every single night. 8 hours of standing guard, followed by 12 hours of training. This left her only 4 hours to eat, clean herself, and sleep. Most needed 10 hours of sleep to function. They were shocked when the human continued to perform her duties without complaint. They did not know that human soldiers had been fighting wars on 4 hours of sleep for thousands of years. They did not know about the trenches of ancient Earth, where young men stayed awake for days while bombs fell around them. They did not know about the night shifts and double rotations that had built human civilization. 4 hours was difficult. 4 hours was not impossible. Next came the combat tests. Axe began putting against multiple opponents at once, 2 cadets, then 3. He told them not to hold back. They didn't. Lost some of these fights. She took injuries. Bruises covered her body like dark flowers. She cracked 2 ribs during one match and dislocated her shoulder during another. The Academy medical staff learned to expect her visits. But she won more fights than she lost. And the fights she lost slowly. She made her opponents work for every victory. She made them remember her. Through all of this, never complained. She never asked for easier treatment. She never explained herself or made excuses. She simply arrived early, trained hard, and left late. The other cadets began to watch her differently. And the student she had defeated on the first day found himself thinking about her often. He had been raised to believe that strength came from size and power. 4 arms were better than 2. Natural armor was better than soft skin. These were facts. But the human did not seem to know these facts, or perhaps she knew them and simply did not care. One evening, and approached her in the dining hall, was eating alone as always. Her food was a simple mix of proteins and vegetables. Humans could not eat cuisine without becoming sick. "May I sit?" and asked. Looked up at him, her face showed nothing. "If you want." He sat across from her, folding his 4 arms awkwardly. "I wanted to ask you something." "Ask." "How did you beat me?" Continued eating. "You telegraphed your attacks. You relied too much on your upper arms. Your footwork was predictable." And felt his mandibles click with embarrassment. "I have trained since I was a child." "So have I." "But you are." He stopped himself, unsure how to continue. "Small, weak, human," finished for him. She set down her eating utensils and looked at him directly. "Where I come from, we learned that the fight is not about size. It is about will. The one who wants to survive more will usually win. And you wanted to survive more than I did." Smiled slightly. It was the first time and had seen her smile. "I always want to survive. That is what humans do." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of another human. Ho was a communications specialist assigned to Horizon Prime. He was tall for a human, with a friendly face and quick eyes. He had made it his personal mission to check on every few days. "You look terrible," he said, sitting down next to her. "When did you last sleep?" "Recently enough." "That is not an answer." Ho looked at the bruises visible on her arms. "You need to report what Axe is doing. This is not training. This is abuse." "It is a test." "A test that will kill you." Shook her head. "No, he is not trying to kill me. He is trying to understand me. There is a difference." Ho made a frustrated sound. "And what happens when he does understand? What then?" "Then he will know what humans are." And leaned forward, curious despite himself. "And what are humans?" Looked at both of them. The who was learning to respect her. The human who was worried about her. 2 very different people asking the same question. "We are survivors," she said simply. "Our world tried to kill us. The cold tried to freeze us. The heat tried to burn us. Animals tried to eat us. We ate them instead. We adapted. We endured. We survived." She picked up her utensils again. They became warriors because they chose to. Humans became warriors because we had no other choice. That night, Axe sat alone in his quarters, reading. He had requested access to the human historical archives. What he found there kept him awake for hours. Humans had nearly destroyed themselves at least 12 times in their short history. Nuclear weapons, climate disasters, pandemics, wars that killed millions. Each time they had crawled back from the edge of extinction. He read about soldiers who charged into certain death because their friends needed them. He read about civilians who survived in frozen wastelands by eating leather and tree bark. He read about prisoners who endured years of torture without breaking. The more he read, the more disturbed he became. Were proud of their warrior culture. They trained from childhood to fight and die with honor, but their wars were civilized. There were rules, there were limits. Humans had no limits. They poisoned each other with gas. They burned entire cities with fire falling from the sky. They split atoms and created weapons that could end worlds, and through all of it they kept going. They adapted. They survived. Axe closed the archive and sat in the darkness for a long time. He had thought he was testing a weak creature from a primitive world. Now he was beginning to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The human woman was not weak. She was something far more dangerous. She was unbreakable. 6 months had passed since arrived at the Combat Academy. She had changed in small ways. Her body was harder now, shaped by months of brutal training. New scars crossed her arms and back. Her eyes had grown sharper, more watchful, but the biggest change was in how others treated her. The open mockery had stopped. Cadets no longer laughed when she entered the training hall. Some even nodded to her in the corridors. It was not friendship. It was not acceptance. But it was respect, earned through blood and pain. Axe had noticed this change. It bothered him deeply. He had thrown everything at the human. Impossible weights, endless hours, multiple opponents. Nothing worked. She absorbed punishment like water absorbed into stone. She bent but never broke. Worse, his own students were starting to admire her. And his finest cadet now sat with her during meals. Others asked her questions about human combat techniques. The human was becoming a curiosity instead of a joke. This could not continue. On a cold morning 6 months after her arrival, Axe called the entire class to the main training hall. Today's lesson was about combat awareness. The ability to sense danger before it arrived, the instinct that separated great warriors from dead ones. He lectured for nearly an hour. He spoke of famous battles where warriors had survived impossible odds by trusting their instincts. He demonstrated techniques for reading body language and predicting attacks. The cadets listened carefully, all except who stood at the back of the room, studying a tactical diagram on the training board. She appeared to be paying no attention to the lecture. Axe watched her from the corner of his eye. She was facing away from him. Her back was completely exposed. She was focused on the diagram, not on him. He made a decision. On the wall beside him hung several ceremonial weapons. Among them was an honor knife. It was old and beautiful, its blade sharp enough to cut steel. It was meant for ritual combat between warriors who had sworn blood oaths. Without warning, without any signal, Axe grabbed the knife and hurled it at its back. It was a perfect throw, silent, fast. The blade spun through the air toward the human's spine. In another second, it would bury itself between her shoulder blades. His hand moved. She did not turn around. She did not look. Her left hand simply snapped up and backward, catching the knife by its handle. The blade stopped 3 inches from her body. The training hall went completely silent. 30 cadets stood frozen in shock. Axe himself did not move, his arm still extended from the throw. Slowly turned around. She held the knife loosely, examining its blade with casual interest. Then she looked at Axe. Her face was calm. Her breathing was steady, but something in her eyes made the room feel colder. "Is class over?" she asked. The words were simple, polite even, but the meaning behind them was clear. She was not afraid. She was not impressed. She was asking if he was finished with his games. Axe felt something he had not felt in decades: uncertainty. He had trained warriors from a dozen species. He had fought in wars that killed millions. He had faced death many times and never flinched. But standing here, Watching this small human woman hold his knife, he was uncertain. How had she known? She was facing away from him. There was no mirror, no reflection. He had made no sound before his throw. His movements had been perfect, and yet she had caught the blade like she was expecting it. The cadets began to whisper among themselves. Axe heard fragments of their conversations. Impossible. Did you see that? How did she know? Walked toward him slowly. Each step was measured and deliberate. The knife rested in her hand like it belonged there. She stopped in front of him and held out the weapon, handle first. I believe this is yours, Instructor. Axe took the knife. His hand trembled slightly, though he tried to hide it. That was unexpected. Was it? Tilted her head slightly. You have been testing me since I arrived. The weights, the extra duties, the multiple opponents. Did you really think I would not notice your patterns? You could not have known about the knife. You were not looking. I did not need to look. His voice was quiet, meant only for him. On Earth, we evolved surrounded by predators, things that hunted us in the dark, things that waited in tall grass to spring at our throats. We developed instincts that most species never needed. We can feel when we are being watched. We can sense danger before it arrives. She paused, studying his face with those dark human eyes. You have been watching me for 6 months, Instructor, studying me, trying to find my weakness. Did you think I was not doing the same to you? Axe said nothing. For the first time in 30 years of teaching, he had no words. Stepped back and returned to her position with the other cadets. She stood calmly, waiting for the lesson to continue, as if nothing unusual had happened. But everything had changed. That evening, Ho found in the observation deck, staring out at the stars. He had heard about the knife incident from a dozen different sources. The story was already spreading across the station. Everyone is talking about you, he said, sitting beside her. I know. That was dangerous. He could have killed you. Shook her head. No, he was not trying to kill me. He was trying to prove something to himself and to his students. Prove what? That I was lucky, that humans are just soft creatures who stumbled into space too early, that we do not belong among real warriors. She finally looked at him, and Ho saw exhaustion beneath her calm expression. He needed to believe that, because if it is not true, then everything he knows about the galaxy is wrong. And what do you believe? Turn back to the stars. Somewhere out there, invisible in the darkness, was Earth, a small blue world that had produced a species capable of catching blades they could not see. I believe we have only begun to show them what we are. The next morning, Axe submitted a formal report to the Galactic Military Council. His message was short and direct. Expand the human exchange program immediately. Lieutenant Park is the most dangerous soldier I have ever trained. If one human can do what she has done, imagine what 100 could do. Imagine what 1,000 could do. We have underestimated humanity. I recommend we do not make that mistake again. The message arrived on his personal communicator late at night. It was from Axe. Come to my quarters, we need to speak. She considered ignoring it. 6 months of torment did not create trust, but something in the message felt different. There was no threat in the words, no challenge, just a simple request. She went. Axe's quarters were sparse and functional. Weapons hung on the walls. Medals and honors sat on a single shelf. There was no decoration, no comfort. It was the room of someone who had dedicated their entire life to war. The instructor sat in a large chair designed for his species. He looked tired, older somehow. When entered, he gestured to a smaller seat across from him. Please sit. She sat. Neither of them spoke for a long moment. Finally, Axe broke the silence. I have spent the past 6 months trying to break you. Tonight, I am here to admit that I failed. Watched him carefully. Why are you telling me this? Because I need to understand. He leaned forward, his 4 eyes fixed on her face. The knife, you caught it without looking. No scanner, no implant, no warning. How? I told you, human instincts. I have studied your species. You should not have those instincts. Humans are too young. Your evolution was too short. You should be like children compared to species like mine. He shook his head slowly. But you are not children. You are something else entirely. I need to know what. Was quiet for a moment. She looked around the room at the weapons and metals, at the scars on Axe's armor, at the tired lines around his eyes. You want the truth about humans? Yes. Then listen carefully. She settled back in her chair. Your world was gentle. I have read about stable climate, few predators, abundant resources. Your people became warriors because you chose to. It was a philosophy, a way of life, something noble and honorable. Axe nodded slowly. This was true. Earth was different. His voice grew quieter. Our world tried to kill us every single day. Ice ages froze entire continents. Droughts lasted for decades. The animals that shared our world were bigger, faster, and stronger than us. We had no claws, no fangs, no armor. We were soft and weak and should have died. But you survived. We did more than survive. We conquered. Her eyes grew distant, looking at something could not see. We learned to use tools because our hands were too weak. We learned to hunt in groups because we were too slow alone. We learned to think ahead because we could not afford to react. Every part of human evolution is a response to something trying to kill us. She stood up and walked to the window. Stars filled the darkness outside. You asked about the knife. On Earth, we have a word for what I felt. Intuition. The sense that something is wrong before you know why. It comes from a million years of being hunted. A million years of sleeping in caves while predators circled outside. A million years of trusting your gut because hesitation meant death. She turned to face him. Can afford to think, to analyze, to plan. Humans cannot. By the time we understand the danger, we are already moving. Our bodies react before our minds can catch up. It is not magic. It is not technology. It is survival instinct burned into our bones. Axe was silent for a long time. Then he asked another question. Your history, I read about your wars, millions dead, billions dead, weapons that could destroy worlds. How did you survive that? We almost did not. Sat back down. Humans have tried to destroy ourselves many times. We split the atom and immediately used it as a weapon. We built machines that could think and immediately asked if they would replace us. We are our own worst enemy. Then how? Because no matter how hard we fall, we get back up. It is the one thing humans do better than any other species in the galaxy. We endure, we adapt, we find a way. She smiled grimly. You cannot break something that has already been broken 1,000 times and rebuilt itself stronger each time. Axe nodded slowly. He was beginning to understand. That is why my tests failed. Yes. The weights, the sleep deprivation, the multiple opponents, these things were difficult for you. Very difficult. But not impossible. Nothing is impossible for a human who refuses to quit. Met his eyes directly. That is what you failed to understand, Instructor. You thought you were testing my body. You were really testing my will. And human will is not something that can be measured or defeated through normal means. Axe sat back in his chair. He looked at the medals on his shelf. 30 years of victories. 30 years of training the finest warriors in the galaxy. And in 6 months, a small human woman had taught him more about strength than all those years combined. Why did you not report me? He asked suddenly. The treatment I gave you violated a dozen regulations. You could have ended my career. Shrugged, you needed to learn and I needed to prove something, not just to you, to the entire academy, to every species that thinks humans are weak. She paused. Besides, I have survived worse. Worse than this. Much worse. She did not explain further. Some stories were not meant to be shared. Axe stood up slowly. He walked to his shelf and picked up one of his medals, the Silver Blade of Valor, his most prized possession. "I want you to have this." Blinked in surprise. "I cannot accept that." "You earned it. You faced every challenge I created without complaint. You defeated my best student. You caught a blade thrown at your back without looking." He held out the medal. "In 30 years I have never seen anyone show such strength, human or otherwise." Slowly took the medal. It was heavier than she expected. The silver was cold against her palm. "Thank you." "Thank you." Axe actually bowed his head, a sign of respect usually reserved for equals. "You have taught me something important, something I should have learned long ago." "What is that?" "That true strength has nothing to do with size or power or natural weapons." He looked at her with new eyes. "True strength is the refusal to give up, no matter what." Smiled. It was a real smile this time, the first she had shown in months. "Now you understand humans." She turned to leave. At the door she paused. "Class tomorrow." Axe actually laughed. It was a strange sound, rough and unpracticed. "Class tomorrow, but perhaps a bit gentler than before." "I would appreciate that." She walked out into the corridor, the silver blade of valor in her hand. Behind her, Axe sat down heavily in his chair. He had spent his life believing he understood warfare. He had been wrong. The humans were coming, and the galaxy had no idea what that meant. The alarm tore through Horizon Prime at 3 in the morning. Was awake instantly. 6 months of training had made her sleep light and her reactions fast. She grabbed her combat vest and blade before the second alarm finished sounding. Red emergency lights filled the corridor. Cadets and staff ran in every direction. Through the chaos, she heard fragments of shouted orders and panicked reports. AL raiders, 30 ships. They had dropped out of hyperspace without warning. The AL were slavers, pirates who raided stations and colonies for living cargo. They sold their captives to the darkest corners of the galaxy. An academy full of young warriors from wealthy families was a prize worth risking everything for. Found Ho at a communications terminal, his fingers flying across the controls. "Status," she demanded. "Bad." His face was pale. "They breached the lower levels 10 minutes ago. At least 200 raiders inside the station. Defenses are holding, but the evacuation routes run right through the breach sector." "Where is Axe?" "Training Hall 3. He is organizing the cadets for a fighting retreat." Nodded and ran. The training hall was controlled chaos, 30 cadets armed and ready. Axe stood at the center, issuing orders in his booming voice. When he saw, something flickered across his face. Relief perhaps, or hope. "Lieutenant Park, good. We are moving to evacuation point 7. The route passes through corridor 12, which reports enemy contact. We will have to fight through." Checked her blade, understood. Axe turned to dismiss her to the rear of the formation. Safe, protected, then he stopped. She was already checking her weapons. Her movements were calm and efficient. Her eyes were sharp and focused. There was no fear in her face, only readiness. "Lieutenant," he said carefully, "you do not have to." "Instructor," she looked up at him, with respect. "I have been waiting for something like this since I arrived." Axe stared at her for a long moment, then he nodded once. "Front of the formation, with me." They moved through the station in tight formation, at the front beside Axe, and guarding the rear, the other cadets filling the middle. Behind them, civilian staff and younger students followed under Ho's guidance. Corridor 12 was a nightmare. AL raiders poured from the breach sections. They were tall and thin, with long limbs ending in sharp claws. Their faces were hidden behind breathing masks. They fought with a mix of energy weapons and curved blades designed for cutting meat from bone. The first clash was brutal. Raiders fell before strength and training, but more kept coming, always more. Fought like nothing they had ever seen. She was smaller than everyone around her, slower, weaker. It did not matter. She used the narrow corridor to limit the number of enemies who could reach her. She ducked under claws and slipped between bodies. Her blade found gaps in armor that others could not see. When a raider grabbed her arm, she broke his grip and used his own momentum to throw him into his companions. When another kicked her to the ground, she rolled under his follow-up strike and cut his legs from beneath him. Axe fought beside her, his four arms creating a wall of steel, but even he found himself watching her between strikes. She moved like water, like fire, like something that could not be stopped. They pushed forward, meter by bloody meter. The evacuation point was close. Then the war chief arrived. He was massive even for a owl, 3 meters tall. His claws had been replaced with metal blades implanted directly into his hands. Scars covered his body like a map of old victories. He cut through 2 cadets before anyone could react. Axe charged him immediately. Their clash shook the corridor. 4 arms against 2 metal blades, power against power. For 30 seconds they seemed evenly matched. Then the war chief found an opening. His blade cut across Axe's chest, slicing through armor and flesh. The instructor fell. Stepped forward. The war chief looked at her and laughed. This tiny creature, this soft little human, he had killed hundreds larger and stronger. "Run, little thing," he said, "or stay and die." Did not run. She attacked. What followed was not a fight, it was a lesson. The war chief was stronger than her, faster than her. His reach was twice hers, every advantage belonged to him. But did not fight fair. She threw debris in his eyes. She used the walls to bounce attacks from unexpected angles. When he blocked her blade, she kicked his knee. When he swung at her head, she was already behind him, her knife opening a wound in his back. She was exhausted, bleeding from a dozen cuts, running on nothing but willpower, but she kept moving, kept attacking, kept refusing to fall. The war chief grew frustrated, then angry, then afraid. This creature would not stop, no matter what he did, no matter how many times he hit her. She kept getting back up. She kept coming at him with those dark human eyes filled with something he had never seen before. Pure, absolute refusal to die. He made a mistake. A small one. He overextended on a strike meant to end the fight. His blade found his throat. The war chief fell. The raiders saw their leader die. Their attack faltered, broke, retreated. When the rescue forces arrived an hour later, they found Lieutenant Park sitting on the war chief's corpse, calmly bandaging her wounds. Around her lay 37 dead raiders. The rescue commander stared at her in disbelief. Looked up, her face was pale from blood loss. Her hands shook from exhaustion, but her voice was steady. "Is class over?" 6 months after the battle, the Galactic Council formally upgraded humanity's status. Developing species became strategic military partner. The Human Exchange Program expanded to every major military academy in the Alliance. Axe retired from teaching. His injuries had healed, but something in him had changed. He had seen what humans could do. He had seen what one human woman could do against impossible odds. His final act was recommending Lieutenant Park as his replacement. On her first day as combat instructor, faced a classroom of mixed species. AL defectors, silicon-based, dozens of others. They all watched the small human woman with varying degrees of doubt. She picked up a training knife and tossed it in the air, catching it without looking. "My name is Instructor Park." Her voice was calm and clear. "I am here to teach you how humans fight. We have no armor, we have no claws, we have no natural weapons of any kind." She looked at each of them in turn. "What we have is the absolute refusal to give up, the willingness to fight when fighting is hopeless, the ability to get back up no matter how many times we are knocked down." She smiled. "By the end of this course, You will understand why my species survived a world that tried to kill us every day. You will understand why we are still here when so many other species have fallen. You will understand what it truly means to be unbreakable." She tossed the knife into the air again and caught it behind her back. "Let us begin." In the back of the room, Ho watched with a proud smile beside him and nodded with respect. Outside the window, the stars waited. Humanity was just getting started.